Hello all, Rick here. This is a quick video looking into what exactly an ion storm is, how they form, what their dangers are, and if they could be a real thing. Let's get started. Ion storms are a rather common occurrence in Star Trek. Well, they're actually quite rare, but they appear with more frequency than other phenomena. They range in severity and can pose a myriad of issues, beginning with sensor interference and culminating in complete starship hazards. The most common effects, however, are the neutralization of transporters, sensors, and warp drives, thanks to intense magnetic and ionic disruption. As a note, unlike subspace phenomena, it's not literally impossible to do these things in an ion storm, just highly ill-advised. Trying to beam through a fierce ion storm is likely to disrupt and scatter the containment beam or the very matter stream itself. The same is true for warp fields, although it takes a particularly fierce event to shut down a warp field with magnetic effects. In fact, ion storms have even been known to play havoc with the computer systems of some starships, risking major damage to the main computer, although not every iteration of a storm will do this, and most starships have long since been shielded against these effects. For early vessels, however, it was a genuine concern. The force of a storm was measured on a scale judged by the pressure it exerted on a starship's hull. Force 2 was an inconvenience to 23rd century vessels, while Force 7 was potentially dangerous. Voyager encountered several Force 8 storms on its journey. Protective measures varied from existing insulation against magnetic effects to depowering anything delicate to avoid it overloading. Simply battening down the hatches and waiting it out on low power was often enough for most storms. However, higher forces could require a ship going to ground. The most common way was to find a planet and basically hide within its upper atmosphere, or even land the ship if that was possible. Of course, the best way was to simply avoid it at warp speeds, although some freak storms either formed too close, moved too fast, or were too wide to outrun. So, ion storms are categorized as a form of magnetic storm, but are characterized by their severity and visceral discharges of energized particles. Plain magnetic storms could pose issues to navigation and rudimentary technologies, but were little more than intense fluctuations that by Earth's interstellar age were no longer deemed dangerous. When they became more severe, they were termed electromagnetic storms, while ion storms can be triggered by the same sort of magnetic events, but of greater intensity. They can form either in space or, more frequently, over a planet with a strong magnetic presence. The ones that form over planets are generally created from the interaction of magnetic forces and ionized particles. Away from planetary bodies, it's the same effect, but the sources can be different. For example, quasars could ionize entire sectors nearby to them, increasing the frequency of ion storms. Or, our old culprit, subspace shenanigans can cause magnetic fluctuations that are intense enough to form a storm front. Basically, you just need two ingredients: intense magnetism and matter to be ionized. Ion storms are possible pretty much anywhere in the Star Trek galaxy, but there are certainly systems that feature them more commonly, and those where they are practically unheard of. Even a couple of locations where perpetual storms are possible. In these instances, there's usually more going on, and the ion storm is a symptom of something else. Some planets and systems that see common storms are the Calandra, Panora, Talax, and Bajor systems, while the planets of Chiron 4 and Isida see frequent batterings of their atmosphere. As all of these systems are inhabited, it's clear that the level of storms witnessed are not severe enough to hamper life. Golondan Core features continual electromagnetic storms. Sufficiently shielded locations, whether by technology or a magnetosphere, can often endure an ion storm with not too bad an outcome. They can wash over planets with varying effects depending on the class of the planet. M-class worlds tend to have a protective magnetosphere, adding to their classification as fit for humanoid life. This does a lot in reducing the severity of the ion storm, and most of the time, such a world is hit by an ion storm, it sees it manifest in the skies as merely a severe thunderstorm, although the magnetic effects can still scramble equipment in the same way. Unprotected astronomical bodies, however, are subject to the full brunt of ion storms, offering little protection. The frequency of encountering ion storms seems higher in planetary systems. However, this is probably because this is where you're going to find people. While they can form in deep space, in most examples you can avoid them if you're even in the area to begin with. Planets don't have that luxury. As alluded to, it takes more than your average sun to generate an ion storm, hence the differences between magnetic, ionospheric, and electromagnetic storms. Now, in real life, we do see ionospheric storms, where the Earth's upper atmosphere is bombarded by solar winds, causing the emergence of aurora. While not identical, it's a cousin to the fictional ion storm we see in Trek. In fact, an intense enough ionospheric disturbance could destabilize unshielded electronic equipment, causing fires, overloads, and power cuts. However, in an event powerful enough to risk the destruction of a ship through brute force magnetic effects, discharges of energy, or something similar? Well, so far, no. Much like the plasma royals of the Badlands, the idea of an ion storm is an exaggeration of the interaction of solar winds and other fluctuations in electromagnetic fields. So, I guess that's kind of a good thing, considering the potential damage real-life solar interactions can do to our society. Last thing we need is a souped-up version that can potentially last years, or be at a level that can even fluctuate the electric impulses of the brain. I've been Rick, and until the next video, thanks again and goodbye.